this video, we are going to look at 3.07 combining functions. All right, so here's a question just like number 1 on your quiz in the OHS. So with this one, we are adding the two functions together. So we need to add them together. So we have 5 over x minus 2, that kind of run together, x minus 2, plus 2x over x squared minus 4. Now, we are adding fractions, so we have to get a common denominator here. So let's factor this x squared minus 4. This is a difference of squares. Okay, this is a difference of squares. So this factors out to x minus 2 and x plus 2. Notice you'll have the x minus 2 in common. So you'll need to multiply by x plus 2 over x plus 2 on the other fraction so you get common denominators. All right, so once you do that, go ahead and distribute. So you're going to have 5x plus 10 over, and I'm just going to write that as x squared minus 4 now when you multiply it out, plus the 2x over x squared minus 4. All right, so we have the x squared minus 4. We have our common denominator now. Combine the numerator. So 5x plus 2x is going to give me 7x plus the 10. All right, so now I need to plug in that 1. So my f plus g of 1, or negative 1, sorry. We're going to plug that negative 1 in, so I'm going to replace my x's with negative 1. So 7 times negative 1 plus 10 all over negative 1 squared minus 4. All right, so let's reduce this out. So I get a negative 7 plus 10 all over negative 1 squared is 1 minus 4. All right, so it looks like I get a negative 3 on the bottom and a positive 3 on top. So 3 divided by negative 3 is a negative 1. So once you evaluate it, you get a negative 1 as your answer. All right, so let's look at a practice question just like number 2. So you're subtracting these two functions. So we are subtracting. So that means we're going to subtract f minus g. Now the order does matter. So f minus the g. So you're going to write the f first. So we have x cubed minus 3x squared plus 3x minus 1. And then you're going to subtract, and I'm going to put this in parentheses because you have to distribute that minus. Minus the g, so that's x squared minus 2x plus 1. All right, now distribute that negative. Okay, distribute that negative, and you're going to get a minus x squared plus 2x minus 1. And then just bring all this down. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that. And combine. So we write our x cubed. Now look at your x squared. So it looks like we have minus 3x squared minus x squared. So that gives me a negative 4x squared. Then you have your x's. So we have 3x plus 2x. So that is a plus 5x. And then we have a, I'm trying to kind of keep, so you can see which ones go together. So negative 1 minus 1, so that is a minus 2. All right, now we have to evaluate at 2. So f minus g of 2. So when you replace all these x's with a 2, so I'm going to have 2 cubed minus 4 times 2 plus 5 times 2 minus 2. A lot of 2's, huh? Okay, so let's reduce this out. So 2 to the third power is 8 minus 4 times 2, that's 8. Oh, 4. Ooh, hold on. That's a 2 squared. So 2 squared is 4. 2 squared is 4 times 4 That should be a 16. That was a close one, y'all. All right, so then we have 5 times 2, that's a 10, then minus 2. There we go. All right, so in your calculator, you put 8 minus 16 plus 10 minus 2, and that is going to give you a 0. Okay, you're going to get a 0 as your answer once you evaluate it at 2. Pretty cool, huh? All right, now we have one just like number 3 on your quiz. You are multiplying. Remember, this is determine the rule for f times g of x. We're going to multiply these two things. So this is square root of x times the cubed root of x. Now, anytime you're multiplying these, I would just switch them over to rational, and then at the very end, put it back in radical. Okay, because it says express the function as a radical. Okay, so let's write this. Now, if you have just square root of x, if there's nothing there, there's an assumed 2. So that means you would write x raised to the 1/2. And over here, we have x raised to the 1/3. Okay, we're multiplying these, so we have x to the 1/2 times x to the 1/3. We have to get a common denominator here. Okay, so 1/2 plus 1/3. Now you could put it in your calculator if you have the multi-view calculator or even I think Desmos. I'm not real sure about Desmos. Most of the calculators you can just put 1/2 plus 1/3 and get your fraction. You got to keep it in fractional form. So I need to get a common denominator. So the number you have in common between 2 and 3 is a 6. Okay. All right, so 2 goes into 6 3 times, so you have to multiply that 1 by 3. So 3 6 is the same as 1/2. All right, so 3 goes into 6 2 times, so we need to multiply that top 1 by 2. So that means we get a 4. No, a 2. Because 3 goes into 6 2 times, so you have to multiply the 1 by the 2, so you get 2. Okay, there we go. Now, since you're multiplying, your rules of exponents means you add the exponent. So that means we're going to get x raised to the 5/6. Okay? And remember it says express the function as a radical. So that means your x to the 5th goes on the inside, and your 6 goes on the outside. Okay? So that's how you would express your function. Now, if you evaluate this thing, f times g of 2, we're going to plug in a 2 here. So we're going to have 2 raised to the 5th. Okay? So you're going to have the 6th root of 2 to the 5th. So you right transfer as a simplified radical. You could leave it like this. So as a simplified radical, it would be that right there. Okay? Now, if you could go ahead and multiply out the 2 raised to the 5th. Okay, you could multiply out the 2 raised to the 5th, and that gives you 32. So you would have the 6th root of 32. Okay, either way, those two are correct. All right, so here's a question just like number 4. We are dividing, so you're going to write your f function on top. So it's 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 all over the 2x squared plus x. All right, so we need to factor the top. Okay, remember you got to factor first times last. You get a 6. Or negative 6 actually. What factors of negative 6 will give you a negative 5? Well, that's going to be a negative 6 and a positive 1, right? And when you add them together, you get that negative 5. All right, so then Since we multiplied by the 2 at the beginning, you got to divide by 2. And this is all these factoring rules. If you need help with factoring, come to a Raise Your Grade session for a refresher on factoring if you need it. So reduce these so we get a -3, and then you still have that 1/2. So when you write these, we have x minus 3 and 2x plus 1. All right, now factor out the bottom. And the bottom just has a common denominator or a common factor of x. So I'm just going to bring that x out. We get 2x plus 1 left over. All right, so notice that your 2x plus 1s cancel out. And you're left with x minus 3 over x, okay, so that's what you're left with, where we still need to restrict the domain, okay, because you can't have certain numbers in the bottom. You're going to have some holes in the bottom. So we're going to have to set the x part and the 2x plus 1 equal to 0. So x cannot be equal to 0 because you can't have a 0 on the bottom. And that 2x plus 1 cannot be equal to 0 either. So we need to solve that out. So subtract the 1. So we get 2x cannot be equal to -1. And then divide by the 2. So therefore, x cannot be equal to -1/2. Okay? So you have to have those two restrictions. You got to have x cannot be 0 and x cannot be 1/2. And your function over here, that f over g of x, is equal to this function when you reduce it. Okay? So you've got your function, and then you still have to restrict the domain since you've got those in the denominator. All right? All right, last one. This is just like number 4. So you are subtracting them. So we're going to subtract those two functions, r minus c. So write your r first. That is 60x minus x squared, and then subtract the c, so we have to put that in parentheses. Don't forget, because you have to distribute that negative. That's one of those common mistakes I see students do. So you need to make sure you put that second one in parentheses. All right, so the c is 120 plus 20x. Distribute, so that gives you a minus 120 minus 20x. All right, combine your like terms, so we get a negative x squared, and then you got your x's. So 60x minus 20x gives me a positive 40x, and then you've got your minus 120. Now if you plug in 20, okay, let me use a different color. So minus 20 squared plus 40 times 20 minus 120. So plug that in your calculator. Okay, so once you plug that into your calculator, you're going to get $280 because remember the revenue of R of X and C of X associated with producing X units of a product are given by the functions. Okay, so what does this mean? So that means when you plug in 120, interpret the meaning of when you subtract. So when you take away the C, so the revenue equals the cost of 20 units are produced and sold. So interpret the meaning of when you subtract those two functions. So the maximum profit of 280 is realized when 20 units are sold and produced. Or you could have the minimum profit of 120 is realized when 20 units are sold and produced. Okay? So when you subtract those two functions, that would be the minimum profit, right? So your answer should be C. All right, so let me know if you have any questions. And don't forget, we do have Raise Your Grade. We do have help sessions. So make sure you ask for help if you need it.